Okay, hello everyone. Today we have with us Dr. Michael Knight. I met him during my doctoral class. He's actually one of my instructors, and I was really amazed at what he's been able to accomplish over his lifetime. And so I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have him on our show, to tell us how he has managed to succeed financially and also still have this much of an education, because some people think the educational system is not a good thing. And so, as you know, we talk on this show about why it is a good thing through people who have walked the walk. So welcome, Dr. Knights. Glad to have
Great.
you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So I'm going to start this off by asking you to please share your background. Where did you come from and how did you walk through life to get to where you are today?
Oh boy. Well, I grew up in the Chicagoland area in the suburb of Chicago, and I grew up in a meek environment. I grew up in a housing complex. My parents had very limited income. They had limited education. They had just an eighth grade education. They worked minimum wage jobs, and so this also meant that I had a lot of hand-me-downs and a lot of things that just didn't match what the other kids had in school. And it was always brought to me by my parents that I needed to work. And I remember this being very much their standard of practice, that you had to work harder, you had to work more. So at 7 years old, I got my first paper route. By the time I was 9, 10 years old, I had three big paper routes: the Chicago Tribune, the Chicago Sun-Times, and then a smaller one, which was the Woodstock Sentinel. But it had already developed that you needed to have a scheduled uh, work life in my growing up. And by the time I was in high school, I was the one who was always known to, have things that other people didn't have, simply because that was set up as a standard. But the one thing my
Okay.
parents didn't do, Yinka, was they didn't encourage education. They didn't see that as a value because that wasn't something that they had in their life. So
Mm.
growing up, that's kind of where I grew up, in the Chicagoland area, and really learning the dynamic of a work value.
Okay. I have a couple of questions, some things to clarify. Like, we are talking to like a global audience, and not everyone knows what a paper route is, for example.
Oh,
So
sure.
maybe you could shed some light on what that meant, and as a 7-year-old, what did that
Yeah.
mean you
Well,
doing?
we're going back to the 1970s. So back then we didn't have this type of technology to be able to exchange information. Everything was
Yeah.
printed on paper. And so any of the news that was to be delivered to society would be printed on what they called newspaper. And so the way that that was distributed then was by a paper boy or a paper girl that would have a sack, and it would be full of papers, and we would walk to everyone's house and deliver the newspaper to them.
So how did you convince them to trust a 7-year-old with that responsibility? That doesn't
So
sound like it's easy.
because I was in this housing complex, the newspaper route, the very first one that I had, was only for the three buildings that we were in. So I think I may have had maybe 15 papers that I had to bring. And so it was every day after school that I had to deliver these. So they would be delivered to my house, and then I just had to distribute them.
Okay, and so you from there you got two other similar
Yep.
paper routes, right? And did
Yep.
that mean you like having to walk long distances to do the job, or was it still in the same hood?
So when the Chicago Tribune came out, that was then much larger. That involved, delivering 60 papers or so. The Chicago Sun-Times was the same thing. That was another paper, and that had a delivery route that was about 60 papers. And then with the first one that I was still doing, those were ones that were smaller. And so every day, so the Chicago Sun-Times and the Chicago Tribune were delivered in the mornings, right? So I had to
Wow.
get up before school, get those
Okay.
delivered, go to school, come home from school, deliver more papers. And I did this every day of the week because the Chicago Sun-Times and the Tribune were both 7 days a week. And the Saturday and Sunday versions were much thicker because they had all the coupons and everything to help encourage people to do their shopping. So this was a
Wow.
lot of work for a little
It
guy.
was. Yeah,
Right.
I'm trying to think of what I was at 7 years old. I don't think I was thinking anything about this.
No, but you know, it's
I
funny.
don't
My,
think so.
my parents were just so excited. They were so proud of me. And, you know, I think the one I made 85 cents a week, right? That the very first paper was really small. It was 85 cents a week. And then when I picked up the others, then I was making, you know, maybe the equivalent of $10 a week. So for
Oh,
1978, for a kid to have $10 a week, I could go to any movie I wanted. I could do all kinds of things. So yeah, I developed
okay,
that work ethic and started to enjoy what the efforts that I put in, what I was getting back out.
okay.
Yeah.
So did you go through elementary school and then high school straight away, or did you take any break in between? Uh,
I was pretty regimented with the education. I mean, obviously, it was public school. I didn't go to private school or anything like that. But I did have to, you know, walk or ride my bike to school,
okay.
which was maybe a mile or so from my house. And you know, even in the winter, and I lived in the Chicago area, so it was cold winters and, you know, had to go to school that way. But grade school, middle school, high school was sequential all the way through. So
Okay.
graduating at, you know, 18 in high school and then just continued to work. And I always had two, three, four jobs all at the same time.
Okay. So tell me this, by the time by the time you were in elementary, we call it primary school where I come from. So I'm trying
Yeah.
to reorient myself. By the time you were done with elementary school, you were still, it was just the paper routes at that time. When you got into high school, you started to add on other things. You
Really
want to tell
changed.
us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so really started to change. I actually had started getting very heavily where I lived outside of where our apartment complexes were. There was a very large subdivision of people who were retired and elderly. And
Oh,
I would just go door to door to door and developed snow shoveling routes, gutter cleaning, roof cleaning, lawn. So in addition to, and I kept those paper routes, I kept those up until I was 16 years old. So you know, for those, it was you know, 8, 9, 10 years of delivering. But then I started doing that. And then, of course, at 16, that's when I started picking up. I worked at a pancake parlor doing, you know, kitchen work. And then I picked up working at the electric company. And then I picked up, of course, some other fast food, which was like Wendy's, Burger King. I started working for the fast food. Then I got into retail. And so at any one time, I probably have had 50 different jobs, but many
wow.
times two or three or four of them at a time.
Did that affect your academics?
No, not at all.
Interesting.
Academics always came during school, and I scheduled myself out so that I would have study halls to be able to take care of what I needed to do. I was not in any of the highly advanced classes. I took just the regular classes that were required to get through high school. I was not academic based. That's not who I was. I didn't have any
Yeah.
encouragement that way. Really, it was just pass your courses and go to work. Pass your courses,
Yeah.
go to work. In fact, I was in a thing that was a work release in high school so that I could get out of, instead of being done at school at 3:30, I
Ah,
could get done at one
yeah.
o'clock
Right,
and,
right.
and go
Okay, that
work
makes sense.
for a couple hours.
That makes
So,
sense.
so
Okay.
there's, but let me share with you, there was a real paradigm shift there because I had always been a person who diligently scheduled my work day, right? So I could get everything done and work, 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 and I enjoyed those paychecks. But at some point, you have to recognize that you're working harder and not smarter. And you've
Mm,
got to get the tools to be paid for what you know, not what you can do, right? So
right.
there's some balance there that
Yeah.
needs to be, and I didn't see that. You know, even when I got into my 20s, I was a police officer. I was the national operations director for a subsidiary of Sony Entertainment. Because of my work ethic, I was able to make things
Happen.
happen, right?
Hmm.
But it didn't put me in a position where I could actually get paid really well.
Yeah, that's a different kettle of fish entirely.
Yeah. By the
Yeah,
time I,
okay.
you
So
know,
do you mind if we do you mind if I just track you back a little bit to that point where you're in high school now? I just
yeah,
wanted to get a sense of by that time you were working several jobs
yeah.
in addition to going to school. Did you have to deal with any of the regular stuff like bullying and any of that stuff? Did you have to deal with that?
So when I was in middle school, which we would say sixth, seventh, eighth grade, right? I did have that. I did have some bullying. I did have part of that was because I didn't really have things that other people had, right? So I had still had the hand-me-down clothes and you know, um, and we lived in an area that was just known for being poor. Um,
Okay.
and everybody else had things that I just couldn't have because they
Hmm.
just had families that had more money. So yeah, there was some bullying, but I got involved with Taekwondo.
Aha.
And so I learned how to defend myself and defend myself well. I actually became the state champion in Taekwondo for the state of Illinois, then the tri-state champion in Taekwondo
Wow.
for
So
Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana. And then I went to nationals and competed at nationals. And
that
you
is interesting.
know,
Is that
so
that's actually something we have in common. I actually did study Taekwondo myself.
okay, okay.
That's an interesting, but I
Well,
never, competed or anything like that. It was we had a different brand of it. So,
yeah.
so please go on. Please go on. That's just
No,
interesting.
so, I mean, so yeah, there was some bullying, but by the time I was in high school, that was no longer an issue.
Yeah.
Because I was in the newspaper, I was in the we had a thing called Fiesta Days. And so I was in the parade because I had, won these competitions. And so people got to
Uh,
know who I was.
okay, that's
Um,
good. That's good.
and so there was a little bit of a focus on me being a good thing, not somebody to pick on.
Okay. All right. So we got through high school on this routine. Then after high school, did you go straight to college or you decided to take a break and do other things?
No, wasn't encouraged. You know,
Oh, dear. Okay.
I ended up with getting 110 credits at the local community college.
Okay.
That,
What does that mean though?
well, that was just, I took courses, but no degree program. I would be interested in
Right, right.
astronomy.
Okay, I
I'll
see
take
what
an
you mean.
astronomy class. Oh, I want to take a music class. Oh, I want to take a physiology
Right,
class.
I see what you
So
mean.
everything was just randomly selected because I thought, yeah, that sounds interesting. I had no direction because I didn't have parents that directed me,
I told you
right?
what to do.
Yeah, and told me you're going to do this. Um, so yeah, there really wasn't anything like that. I ended up marrying when I was 25 years old and
Nice.
decided that we would move and relocate. And that's when the entrepreneurial stuff really started to kick in.
Okay. Want to tell us about that? What you do
Sure.
first?
Well, I first started with the idea of buying land and then wanting to build properties with the
Wow.
idea that I would,
At 25 years old.
25 years old.
Oh my gosh, please go on.
Yeah. So I bought 22 acres of land, had it subdivided, and the first demo house would be my house. So I bought that land and I built that first house. It was a 2,100 square foot Cape Cod house. I
Whoa,
did
that's a huge
all
house.
myself, except for the flat concrete work in the basement and some help with the roof, which was a real steep roof. I needed some help with that. But other than
So you
that,
did all of it yourself.
yes. And then I have a licensed electrician come in and sign off, a licensed plumber come
Right,
in,
right.
sign off to make
Yeah,
sure
yeah.
that everything was done correctly. But it
Okay.
took a year of my life to get that done. And I did that between the ages of 26 to 27. I used the
Hmm.
equity that was there to buy the first drive-in restaurant, which was A&W fast food restaurant.
So was that like a franchise model you just paid for and you got
It was a franchise model,
so
and
so tell us a little bit about how that works. Do you have to like go through a training to do it, or
so
you just buy the
I bought the business and dropped the franchise.
okay.
So the franchise fees were a little over 13%. So 13% off of your gross sales went right to them. And then there was the requirement that I purchased everything through them, which I could purchase through
Elsewhere.
Cisco. or
Mhm.
Reinhardt or one of the other food services, the exact same product, and it was 15% cheaper. So right off the bat, I was almost
Within
30% up.
28%. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I made that decision. And so we dropped the franchise and we took off. Um, within three
What'd you
months, we had,
do? How long did you run the A&Ws before you? Sorry,
it was
for everyone else, A&Ws are like an American fast food joint. You know, we got to remember that it's a
yeah,
global audience.
internet. Got it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's a
So,
food restaurant. We cars come in, they park, they can come up to the window, they can have drive up service where somebody comes out, takes the order from the car. If you're familiar with in the United States, Sonic is like this. Sonic,
yeah,
so that would probably be the most similar if you're not familiar with the older franchise models of A&W.
yeah.
So but within a few months, we decided to buy a second location. So we bought a second location and then we moved on from there. And, that was now I turned into 100 hours a week.
Okay. So, how many A&Ws did you end up buying?
There was
Um,
two of them and then a straight ice cream location.
okay.
Did ice
So,
cream.
and you ran all three at about the same time. Were they all in the same city
Not in the
or
same city. They were all between no 10 to 15 miles apart each.
okay, not too bad,
Yeah.
but
So
still
this was
ways
in
apart.
northern Wisconsin.
Yeah, okay. And I mean, despite these franchise costs, you must have still been making a profit for you to buy a few more, right?
So
So,
yeah, we realized right away in our first purchase that the numbers that had been provided to us
mm,
in the documentation of their previous sales were very, very wrong. But you don't have anything to go off of other than their returns and what they're
yeah,
providing you. But we realized that they had been significantly skimming off the top, so they didn't
interesting.
have to report taxes. Um,
Mm,
so we realized right away there was a much greater profit that was there, and we had the choice. We could pay down the down payment or use that money to purchase a second location, and that's what we did. We leveraged ourselves into. So I built the house, used the equity there to get into the fast food restaurant to start with, use that, and then leveraged ourselves into a second location. And we
okay.
did the same process, but Inca, the real issue here is that I was able to manage doing 110 hours a week, which is just ludicrous crazy, 7 days a week. But
Yeah,
there's no way that a person can do physical hours like that long term. You can
yeah,
do
yeah.
it
It's not
short
that
term, but
bad.
it starts to play on you. And at this time, I also had a young family starting. And so we now were expecting our second child. Um, how do you keep that up? You
Yeah.
know,
Did your wife work with you sometimes or all
all
the
the
time?
all the
So
time.
at least that's helpful. You're seeing each other. It's harder when when you
Yeah.
don't get to see your family, you know. Yeah.
So
So
at this point, the model that had been taught to me from my parents
you started
had
to
done
question.
very well, right? Had done very well. But it was starting to play its effect on me. And I
Yeah.
started having some health problems by the time I was 27, 28 years old, just from the stress of the
Yes.
hours, right? So this is where I had to start thinking about how do you get smarter and work smarter and not harder? And so
So
this is
this
where
was around 29 years old or thereabouts.
28 years old, I made the decision. We're
Oh my gosh. Just
selling
like
everything,
that.
and we're going back to school. I'm going to school. I've always wanted to be a pilot. My uncle was a pilot. He works 70 hours a month. He travels all over the world and he makes $200,000 a year. I want to be like him. So how do I do that? Right? So you got to have a degree in aviation if you want to have a real successful career. And so that was the direction I decided. So made that decision with my wife. We were going to go back to school. We decided on Southern Illinois University, which had everything that we would want. And they were the #2 aviation school in the country at the time. And it was affordable. We could do this and we wouldn't have to work. Once we sold everything, it'd be great. So we sold everything, went back to school, and I pursued aviation.
Okay. Was it
Total paradigm
challenging?
shift. Do you see
Yeah.
that
I
shift?
mean, that is huge. That's like one extreme to the other.
Yes.
But by that time, I mean, you had good cause to
Yeah.
understand that, this isn't working smart. I have to change
Yeah.
the way I'm approaching things. So I think we get that. I think what I'm struggling with here is, um, with the money from selling off stuff, you could afford the tuition, right? So you didn't really have to bellyache about stuff like that, right? Is that how it worked out?
To some degree.
To some
Um,
degree.
we had made a lot of purchases for new equipment for the restaurants, new ice cream machines, new fryers, new burger machines. Everything had to be updated. We purchased businesses that were in the state of decline
Mm,
time. So, we had some expenses, but we still were able to come out of that, buy the house that we were going to live in and two cars, and then
okay.
still have a little bit of money. But I still had to take out student loans and everything else for
Oh, you
school.
still did. Wow. Okay. Oh, that's tough. But did you do any work at all while you were a student, or you
I
just kind of
did.
thought,
Once I got my aviation taken care of, I got all the way through my commercial license. I became a flight instructor. It took me a year to do the pilot's license, the instrument, the commercial, and the flight instructor ratings.
okay.
At that point, I started doing flight instruction. I started teaching how to fly
Mm,
planes. And at the same time, I had moved into my master's program, and through the university, I got a teaching assistantship. And so I started teaching at the university.
mhm.
And
So did
so,
that help with the funding, or was that part of the way you funded it too, the
yeah,
TA,
that's how I
teaching
had to fund
assistants?
everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was also a big change in that my parents saw what was happening and they saw the success happening. And by the time I had gotten my pilot's license and commercial, they saw that that was the direction. They were so enthused by this, they literally sold everything and they moved in the house 6 doors down from where I lived. They wanted to be near me. They wanted to
I
be near the
know.
grandkids. They saw everything and they were just they were like, you're going to be the first one with a degree in the family. You're going to be the
Oh,
first
that is
one.
so cool. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
So they all of a sudden kind of really bought into the education.
Wow. And I'm glad, it worked out like this for you, because the people that we're trying to talk to are people who are thinking, a lot of people think that, what's the point of going to school, right? And so,
Yeah.
it's nice to hear it from your perspective that,
There's let
everything, so please
can I
go on.
yeah, can I
Yeah,
chime in
sure.
on that? You can have a great work ethic, but if you don't have the knowledge base to be able to apply your knowledge, then you're going to have problems with people not recognizing that you're knowledgeable, right? So you have to have that
Yes.
knowledge. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to have a formal education going to a university. You could get that through, let's say, an apprenticeship. There are some amazing master carpenters that build amazing buildings that do not have a degree per se from a four-year university, right?
Yeah, you don't have to. Yeah,
But they've
that's
gone through an apprenticeship and become a journeyman, and they've done other things to be able to get that education. It's
yeah,
still an education,
it
and it's
still
just
is.
a critical component. One of the things that we're seeing more so today, and I've seen it over the last 25 years, is people are wanting to do things in which they get paid, but they don't have to work for it. So they
That
want to
is so
do
interesting.
things like, they want to be an affiliate, they want to be an influencer, they want to do all these different things like that, which there is a knowledge base to it. But the reality is that you have to have expertise in order to be able to be successful in whatever field you're going into. So you can
So,
gain that through life experience, through
yeah.
work ethic. You can build, some, but ultimately you have to have some type of knowledge base of educational experience to be able to pull it all off.
Okay. Good. That's a very good point to bring out. So let's talk a little bit about school. Was doing academics, was it mentally challenging for you? I mean, do you think you're like just brilliant, or you had to struggle through some of this stuff?
No, So here's what so I talked about the 100 hours a week. I talked about having all those jobs, right?
Mhm.
And the only way I
Yeah.
could do those things was to be very routinized in making a schedule and sticking to it. So every day is the same. Today I still do the exact same thing, right? But this was applied to school as well. This is how I was able to do 81 credits in a year to finish my bachelor's degree, how I was able to do a double master's degree in a year and a half, and being able to do a double PhD major in just 2.5 years. My
Okay,
entire
so
education was five and a
okay,
half
slow down.
years.
Let's talk about 5.5 years it took you. So what was your bachelor's degree in, just for the sake of those who are listening?
Aviation management and
And then the
flight.
master's, aviation management and flight. And then the master's degree was in,
Public administration and education.
wow. Okay, that seems like a shift to me. But then the PhD.
Well, I can explain that as well. So, okay, and the PhD is in business administration with a focus in information systems and strategic management.
Okay, right. So tell us about the master's, the seeming shift to
So it's
education.
really not. This is where the whole shift came for me to become a professor, right? This is probably another pinnacle part of where things happen in life. I was a flight instructor, and I decided that I wanted to continue on and get my master's in public administration for aviation administration. They had a very specialized master's program at Southern Illinois University. And so I started in that program. But at the same time, I was flight instructing. And I loved when students, when the light bulb would go on and they would do something for the first time, like land a plane, get through ground effect and land it all by themselves. And you would see them get all excited, right? And they couldn't believe, you can't see them, but I got goosebumps even right
Just
now.
thinking about it. Oh my God. Okay,
Because
that was exciting.
those first students, you can hear it in my passion of how I'm talking. When
Mhm.
they landed the plane for the first time and they just looked at me and they're like, I did it. And I'm like, I relived the experience every single time. And I thought, this is super cool. I need to
It
stay
is.
in aviation. I need to start teaching more with aviation. So I actually did. I ended up having enough 1,150 hours of flight time. Right? That's a
Wow.
lot of time being in a plane. And I've had students turn me upside down, point me at the ground, all kinds of
And
stuff.
that's that I don't envy.
But that's how that happened. And so I was already almost through the master's program, and I thought, and I scratched my head and I said, maybe I need to learn a little bit more about education and the sequence of how to design instruction. And so that's how I ended up going over to the School of Education, telling them what I was doing. And we customized a master's addition to what I had in curriculum and instruction, how to design instruction, right? How to
Nice.
communicate effectively through educational terms.
Yeah, which
So,
is a big problem in
yeah.
colleges.
So,
Yeah.
so that's how that happened. And then when I got done with that, I had a decision to make. Do I go into aviation? Do I start flying commercially and just fly people in a plane? Do I get into the workforce and go towards maybe teaching aviation at a higher level? Or somebody said, Michael, with all of your background in business, owning business, being a national operations director, all the things that you've done, you should really think about maybe doing your PhD. And I said, why would I do that? And they said, well, because you can teach, you can pursue business, you're going to get the credentials that you need in corporate America to be an expert. And if you go into education, you're going to have the lifestyle of a professor, which is going to allow you to have a more relaxed lifestyle with a winter break, a Christmas break, and a summer break, right? And what kind of salaries are we talking about? And they said salaries are over 100,000 a year. Uh, and I said, what? Sounds too good to be true. So I
Yeah.
decided that I would do my PhD, and I went in that direction because I could still fly.
Do other stuff, yeah, in spite of all of this. Yeah.
And so I
So
was able to,
that's really good.
that's how I
That's
did
really
it.
good.
I
Yeah.
fell into so much of this. It just, because that work ethic was there, if I decided I wanted to add something, I could just schedule it in to make sure that it worked. And
Wow.
yeah. So the big key is, remember, we all have the same 24 hours a day,
Yeah.
right? And we all need 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And we all need to have our get up, wake up, eat, get ready for, so we only have a limited number of hours of waking time. And
Okay.
you've just got to learn how to master scheduling yourself and then staying on a routine. That's it.
Yeah.
We're all creatures of habit. So if we can stay within a habitual schedule, you can accomplish amazing things.
Okay. So it's a big part of just being disciplined, focused, consistent is a big
Yeah.
part of this.
And
Okay.
you mentioned something else earlier, Yinka, talking about, was I smarter than everyone else? I
Yeah.
always kind of laugh. I always say, I'm not smarterist. I'm not smarterist. I just have made that conscious decision. And I tell all my students, even the undergraduate students, a little bit of this story. And I say, this is what I did. I am not smarter than anyone in this class. If you're in the college class, I sat in the same chair you did, or you are, right?
Mhm.
I'm not any smarter. And you know what? None of the people that have been on your broadcasts have been smarter,
Yeah.
right? They're not, but they have made the choice that they're going to not go out to the bar on Friday night or Saturday night. They're not going to go watch the football game, the baseball game, the basketball game. They're not going to go hang out. They're going to take the time to apply themselves towards their dream, right?
I hear
And
you.
it's just a conscious decision for time management of where you put your energy. And
Well,
there'll be a
thank
time and a place that it's time to kick your feet back and, sit back and watch the sunset on the beach. There's time for that as well.
Well, that's I'm glad you shared that because that's an encouragement even to me. Sometimes when you're doing like, I'm in a doctoral class and you just wonder how do you fit this all in, and you
Yeah.
have to make a lot of sacrifices. And so thank you for sharing that. It's very helpful.
Here's one
Um,
bit of advice. We talk about talking the talk and then walking the walk, but
yeah.
believe it or not, you cannot walk the walk unless you can talk the talk. And
Mhm.
here's one of the reasons why this all came very easy to me through the educational process. I was continually talking about everything that I was doing. If I was in a class with these students, right, or other students that I was in class with as a student, then I was teaching my course, I would bring up what I was learning and talk about it. In fact, I would have, here, I'm going to pull up an example. If I didn't have someone to talk to, I'd use a pencil and then I would teach whatever I was learning, I would teach to my pencil. Okay, so now what you need to do is this. And
You
then,
love teaching, don't you?
yeah, well, that's what, right? So you remember a certain percentage of what you hear. You remember a certain percentage of what you read. You remember a certain percentage of, and as you go into more rich media communication and talking and listening and then teaching, you recall it much easier, much faster. So you've got to
Yeah.
be able to, so
Yeah.
like if you're learning how to spell words, you could probably write it out. Okay, that's one way you're looking at it. But if you talk it and say,
Say it
well,
out.
recording, recording, recording.
Mhm.
Now you've spoke it, you've heard it, you've looked at it, and you've written it.
Yeah,
You're gonna remember.
I see what you're saying, and some other people express it like they say if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, then you probably don't get it yourself. You have to
Right,
learn how to, you have to
right.
learn how to, relate to it, say it out, live it, and then it just becomes a part of you. I see what you're saying. Okay, before we get too deeply involved in other things, can I ask you that? Can you tell us like one or two very serious challenges you've had to deal with getting to where you are today? Some of the
Yeah,
most how did you like deal with them? Because people seem to think that, people that are up there don't have challenges or, it was easy for them, So
yeah.
can you think of it?
Balance, balance, balance. Um, if you are married,
Mhm.
balance is going to be harder.
Yeah.
If you're single, you only have to worry about yourself, right? So you have to balance your connections in
Mm.
everything that you do. And when you have a significant other, that significant other requires you to balance everything else with their needs.
Yeah.
So that's probably one of the bigger challenges that I struggled with, probably still struggle with, is maintaining that balance. I have a tendency to put things on the schedule so that it's all done and then I can be free. But
Quite that
sometimes
simple.
that puts me until 10 o'clock at night, and then it's
Yeah.
too late for the balance to be with family. So you've got to balance.
Okay.
I think
That-
that's
That's,
a major critical component. Um,
absolutely.
yeah, that I think is one of the biggest things that I've been challenged with in general. The other one is not knowing how to say no effectively. When,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
example, when you contacted me to say, "Hey, can you put together some time to, do this podcast?" And I said, "Well, what's it about?" And then I said, "Okay, yeah. But if you remember, you contacted and I said, "Okay, I've got a little bit of time between now and now. This is
Yeah.
what I
This is the window.
um
Yeah.
I don't say no enough."
So
That's
something to work on. Well, I'm glad you didn't say no to me. So,
Yeah.
so something to
No,
work
this
on.
is a pleasure. This is a pleasure. And I hope that some of what I share is going to be valuable to the listeners.
I am sure it is, because where I come from, some of what you hear is issues of racism. You hear all those things.
Yeah.
There's discrimination, and that therefore the environment is skewed against them. So it's actually nice to have someone who came from, you basically came from lack. You guys didn't have
I
anything growing.
didn't
There
have
was
anything.
nothing. There was nothing going on. I mean, you were sharing with me that your full dinners were only on weekends.
Yes.
Uh,
Full dinner was,
so
yep, weekend. And then it was leftovers. And by Thursday, it was salad soup. It was maybe some noodles. That was all we had.
and you basically lived in something like similar to the projects. You know,
I tell people that I grew up in the projects. I mean,
yeah.
we
So
call it a rental community. I try
yeah,
to make it sound better than it was.
yeah. So that would be your own version of what you had to deal with to get to where you are, right? And
Yeah.
so the important thing is that, how do you navigate through these obstacles, these
So
curveballs that life throws at you, because everybody's got them somewhere.
everybody has them. And some people have, well, we have them. Everyone has different ones, right? Now,
Mhm.
you talked about racism, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is a real reality. There is
Mhm.
no doubt. And it goes in every direction. It's not
Of
just
course.
one race
Of
to
course.
another.
Yeah.
It's every direction from every race
Human
to every
nature.
other
Yeah.
direction. It just is. And I've experienced that. Um, Being poor from the aspect of the socioeconomic component.
Mhm.
I lived in China.
Classism.
I've been left out of things or told that I couldn't do things because I was white. So
Wow.
I mean, it's I've experienced some of that.
Yeah.
There is some aspects where there's not the same opportunities, right?
Mhm.
There's just not the same opportunities. And I had people that I knew that were able to go off to college and they were going to these very expensive universities and everything else. And I sat there and went, well, I guess I can take a class at the community college. And I could
Mhm.
only afford to take one at a time because by that
Yeah.
point I was helping mom take care of the bills, right?
Of course, like a
So,
good
but
son.
I totally know that not only do we have this happening in the world, but it's happening here in the United States where there are people, and because I know it, I grew up with it.
Okay.
So I would tell anyone, if you want to make a difference, if you want to change your stars, you can change your stars. You can. It's not going to happen overnight. I mean, it took me a lifetime, right? And I didn't make the actual real decisions to make changes until after 25 years old.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would have still been working and plugging
Mhm.
away, and I would have tried to have 3 or 4 jobs. And,
Yeah.
but
Probably
even
ruined your health in the process too.
losing your health in the process.
Yeah.
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 So,
So,
work smarter. And
yeah.
then, the other thing is, now today I don't necessarily look, I notice the difference in the cost of food, but if I think probably the thing that I do, we compensate, right? So because I didn't have food when I was a kid, I have a tendency now that if I want, I don't care what it is at the store. If I say I want to have a steak dinner tonight, I'm getting a steak dinner, right? That's just, I'm going to do that. That's the one area that, I think I struggled
You
with
need to
as a
work.
kid.
Yeah.
So now, it's funny is that my daughter's favorite thing in the world is, egg noodles with garlic and butter on them, right? I'm
Where
like,
did you get that from?
I don't want to see this. I did this my whole childhood growing up. So, but
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
so now today, when I go to the grocery store, I don't look between two different brands to save 3 cents,
Mm.
5 cents on a can of soup. If I want that soup, I'm just gonna
Yeah,
grab it.
yeah, it's a
Um,
statement of, yeah, that's what trauma does to you. But, I'm glad, you got over on the other side of things. Okay, you've actually given us a lot of good advice, through the course of telling your story. Um, you've told us that no, you didn't get any of this by accident. You had to put in a lot of work.
mhm.
And, a good rule of thumb is to work smarter rather than harder. So I want to talk a little bit about that. These days, you know, there are a number of directions you could go to financial independence. How do you decide that this is the way I'm going to go? How do you decide what's my work smart technique?
So you know how many people go to school for the sake of going to school? Maybe it's mom, dad, maybe it's because they
Mhm.
thought that's what I'm supposed to do. I got to go to college.
Mhm.
And they get done with college and they get their degree, and then they never work within the area of their degree.
Happens a
You
lot,
know?
yeah.
Um, and so that's a big telltale sign that we should all be learning. That just because you go to school doesn't mean you're following your passion or your dream. I really, when I was 5 years old, I have a recording on a cassette tape. And I have this recording that my mom took of me. And she asked me, when I grow up, Michael, when you grow up, what do you want to do? And it's just amazing. I said, I'm going to be a pilot and I'm going to fly to Hawaii. That's what I'm going to do. I want to live in a tropical, basically, I want to live in a tropical area and I want to fly planes. And then a little bit later, I'm going to teach everybody how to do it.
That
And I'm
is so
thinking,
interesting.
yeah, I listened to this about 7 years ago. I found that tape and I listened to it and I just about fell over. I'm like, I'm a
Like,
pilot.
oh my
I've been
gosh.
to Hawaii, I've been to Hawaii a dozen times. And now I teach people how they can be successful,
That is
right?
so cool. That is so cool.
I think here's the thing. I think that we have to pursue our passions. We need to pursue our dreams. Just getting a degree and working a nonsense job because it's going to pay you is not the right answer. You have to have a passion for it. We have to pay the bills. And so if you need to work while you're finding your passion or pursuing your passion, do what you got to do to pay the bills, but
Mm.
put your energy forth. Now, there is a famous guy and his name is Tony Robbins.
Oh
Have you
yeah,
ever
I
heard
know
of
Tony Robbins.
Robbins? Tony Robbins, I had an opportunity to attend a couple of his seminars, but he told a story regarding when he first started out. He started working for somebody 8 hours a day. And so he would work for 8 hours a day to pay the bills. But then he would come home and he would work on his own dream for 8 hours. If I'm going to give that person 8 hours of my life, I better give
Definitely.
myself 8 hours of my life to pursue my dream,
Mhm.
right? Well, Tony Robbins is now, of course, a
Yeah,
multi-millionaire
multi-billionaire.
and world
He's not
renowned
gonna
and
be.
known for his advising.
Yeah.
The reality was that was what he wanted to do. That was his dream. I would tell us all the same thing.
Hmm.
Pursue your dreams, your passions. Make time so that you can find those to become your fruit.
I think, Dr. Knight, I think that's very good advice. But I still have one. What if your question, what I have one question. What if your passion doesn't pay the bills?
Well, then it doesn't pay the bills. It's still your passion. You'll
Okay,
have to
so
work to pay the bills, but
okay.
then still pursue your passion.
Yeah, so because I think we have to cover that too. Sometimes you have passions that are not commercially useful,
Of
and if
course.
you if you decide that I want to leave everything that makes sense to go and do that, that might not be the right way to do it. And I think we have to put that in the right perspective.
So there is a good friend of mine, and he is also a college professor, right?
Okay.
But his passion was to basically be on the beach. He
Seriously?
wanted to watch the sunset. He wanted to be where it was warm. He wanted all these different
Oh,
things. And so he got himself a really great laptop, right? Now, he is a college professor now, but this is back 25 years ago or so, 20 years ago. And yeah, 20 years ago. And he got himself a laptop, got himself a job online teaching English to Chinese
ah,
students. And
cool.
so he could do this online while sitting on the beach.
So he
And
got his
literally to
wish.
this day, he's doesn't make a huge income, but he makes a good
He's
enough
happy.
income to have his apartment that is on the beach. He goes out and sits on the beach every single day,
So he got
right?
his dream. I see what
So
you
you get
mean.
the dream. So I think that again, pursuing that, you find a balance, you find a way to connect and collaborate what you're doing with your dream.
Okay. All right. I've got, I think, just two or three more questions. The first is that throughout all your study, did you invent anything? Did you have any patents?
So I have helped over 100 small companies start, develop, and launch. In that process, many of them have pursued patents that I have only been the advisor for, right?
Okay.
But I do hold two patents that are involved with the construction platform.
Oh,
That's a social networking business. I am a partner in that company, and we hold a couple of patents with that. So yes, I do have some patents. When you come up with an original idea, and it doesn't have to necessarily be an original idea, but you do it in a new and unique way that nobody else has ever done, then it becomes you can protect it through patent. So I do have a couple of those. And so again, it does require creativity to come up with these unique ways of how things are going to be done. One of them for the constructionplatform.com, right? It's the company, a social networking platform for the construction industry. We patented 1,800 different licensure certificates throughout the United States and how they can be applied to the construction industry so that people can show how they are specialized and be able to network correctly with contractors and tradesmen.
okay. Okay.
The
So,
other one is our bidding and labor request process of how something happens for a contractor to request bids or to request labor within the industry. So it's a unique way of how it's done on our platform that's not done anywhere else.
okay. Did this have anything to do? I mean, did some of this knowledge come from your years of education, or was more of a bit of both, your life experience and
Part of it has to do with the amount of small business advising that I've done over the
yeah, that you had
years.
to do,
You
yeah.
learn
Okay.
bits and pieces here and there, and then I've done a significant amount of consulting for large companies throughout the United States. Um, and so you learn what they do, how they do it, and then you think about how you might be able to apply what they're doing in a new and unique way with what you're doing. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think it's more about exposure. I think you have to really have that networking exposure to be able to understand those dynamics.
Okay. So yeah, I think that's a very good way to explain it. Thank you for sharing that. All right. One more one. I have this other question that do you think that do you have a belief system that you think may have affected the way you've done life, or you're one of those who just believes, get it done, forget the excuses? I mean, where do you fall on that?
There are, religious conviction
Mhm.
components. I think that we all have to some degree, even if you're not religious, you probably don't recognize your lack of religion is religion.
Mhm.
Um,
It's one way of
so
doing it.
I
Yeah.
think I have conviction to those things. There are standard moral, ethical
Mhm.
values that people hold. They can hold them from the culture that they grew up with, or they can develop them because of the culture that they grew up in,
Yeah.
that they don't want to have what they had. So there may be some of that goes into my belief system, but my belief system is very much the golden rule dynamic, and that if you want that to be done for you, that you should be doing it for others.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so, giving, it's funny, I'll be driving in the car and I'll let multiple people pull out in front of me, and my wife will be like, we're never going to get there. I'm like, someday someone's going to let us in when we need to be let in, right? That's
So that's a good
so
way to, yeah. Well,
yeah.
that's good. A lot of people say stuff and they don't actually live it, so that's good.
Yeah. So
So
little things
thank
like
you.
that,
Thank you
just
for sharing.
when I see somebody who needs help and they're trying to reach something at the top shelf, since I'm a tall 6'3" guy,
Oh, you're pretty tall.
I'm reaching up, helping the shorter folks get the things they need on the top shelf.
Nice,
Eventually, I
nice.
may need them to get something from the bottom shelf for me.
You have a sense of humor, don't you? That is if they are vertically challenged. All right. So, last one. What are your hobbies? What do you do when you're not working?
Hobbies. Okay. So I've had a series of them. They always end up being something of odd interest and then turn into a business. Somehow I turn those hobbies into business. But I was very involved with cryptocurrency and crypto mining up until about 2 years ago, right before Ethereum decided to go down. It just changed from proof of work to proof of stake. Um, but uh, so I was really involved with cryptocurrency in that was a hobby of mine. Now I've changed that over to the freeze drying industry and freeze drying candy. I don't know if you've ever had freeze dried candy.
Not yet.
Okay, well, that's been a real big passion. You can find out and read a little bit about me as well on
Okay.
it's just candyfreezer.com,
Let me figure that out.
candyfreezer.com.
Okay, got it.
Yep, and check that out, candyfreezer.com, and you'll see all the different candies that I make. And we sell throughout the United States. Um, so kind of interesting, everything that you wouldn't think, M&Ms don't freeze dry, but M&Ms that are made with caramel absolutely do. And so
Oh my gosh.
everything from caramel M&Ms to Skittles to Milk
I
Duds
love
to
Skittles.
Jolly Ranchers to you name it. We do it all. 45 different candies, and then of course all of our original candies. So
Wow.
very interesting.
That is
But
so
yeah, I have
nice.
a hobby with that. But honestly, my real hobby would just be being with my family.
Yeah, that's really important.
In
Yeah.
the end, I guess we're coming up to the end, but let me share this one thing. When I was a little boy, I told you my mom worked a minimum wage job. Her job was certified nursing assistant at a nursing home. Her job was basically to clean up all the messes that the old people had, right? So every day after school, I had to go right by where she worked, and I would always go there and I would spend some time with those older folks, and I would play checkers with them and I would listen to their
Mhm.
stories. And I remember this is in the 70s, right? So some of these people are 100 years old,
Yeah.
right? Some of these people are 100 years, and they're telling me stories of when the first car, they saw the first car. They're telling me
Mhm.
stories of World War I. They're telling me stories of how their parents fought in the Civil War in the United States,
Mhm.
right? And here's the thing that I learned. I was just a young boy, but I learned this. They never told me stories of how much money they made. They never told me stories of all the success they had. They told me stories of the people that they loved and the people that loved them. And then I realized that they were all alone in this nursing home and nobody came to visit them. And I was their adopted grandson. And those old folks loved me, right?
Yeah.
And I came to love them as well as my family. And I would have to say goodbye to them and everything else. And at the last time when I would see them, they would hold my hand. And I would know that that was the number one important thing. So my hobby, my family, my kids.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. Sometimes we get carried away with all the running around and we forget what to prioritize. So thank you very much. Well, thank you. We've gone a little bit over our allotted time, but I do appreciate you seeing us and sharing some of your wisdom with us.
Sure.
You've
Well,
been a
I'm always,
very, yeah,
if
you've
there's
been,
anything I can do to help anyone that's a listener,
oh, thank you, thank you.
please have them contact me.
Thank you. It's been very great to have you on board, and we feel especially blessed that you gave us some of this time. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us, and I hope this will impact some people who have questions about life, about how whether it's fair or whether the educational system is worth its while or its weight in gold. All of those questions you will learn through people like Dr. Knight that nobody had it. Nobody was born, not everyone was born with a silver spoon in their mouths. And, you just have to work through life on your own terms. Whatever you believe, you can achieve. Don't let anybody tell you that, anything is out of your reach. And of course, if you want to become an expert at something, you have to learn. You have to walk through a process of learning before you can become an expert. So be disciplined, be diligent, be kind to people, and never prioritize anything over your family. Okay. All right. Thank you, Dr. Knight. It's been nice to have you. And
Very
again, we
welcome. Thank you
appreciate
for
you
the
very much.
opportunity to chat with you.
Thank you. Have a great one. Bye.